Molly McGrath is a professor of philosophy and director of the Center for Teaching Excellence at Assumption University. She works in phenomenology, social ontology, and political philosophy, with particular interest in Edmund Husserl, Aristotle, the classics of Plato, Thomas Aquinas, Montesquieu, among others. In 2021, Professor McGrath received the Michael O'Shea Presidential Award for Excellence in Teaching at Assumption's annual convocation in honor of her pedagogical excellence, academic rigor, and commitment to her students. She was especially recognized for her teaching method, referred to as a mutual journey between her and her students. Her work has appeared in many journals, including the International Journal of Philosophical Studies, Husserl Studies, and Law and Liberty. She regularly publishes short pieces analyzing film and TV shows from a philosophical perspective. She received a BA in Political Economy and Philosophy from Mount St. Mary's College and an MA and PhD in Philosophy from the Catholic University of America.
So I just want to notice a pattern on universities in the United States. Universities like to flatter their students by telling students they should change the world and that university education gives them tools to do so. The tools given are various. Some are bourgeois, pre-professional skills in accounting or nursing, for example, preparing people for middle-class employment in contemporary capitalism. Other tools are more Enlightenment, the Baconian Cartesian sciences, natural and social, that make the world our workshop, producing technology and medicine and scientifically backed policy. The humanities are a bit demoralized in this context, as they don't measure up to the sciences or the professions in exactness or usefulness. But they have conformed, joining the social sciences to develop tools to train students to try to change the social world. This isn't all that happens in the humanities, mind you. It's just what happens often today when humanities convince themselves that to educate is to prepare students to transform the world. What are the tools the humanists offer? One is postmodernism, which unmasks claims of reason and truth as weapons for domination. Its sophistic tricks can be quickly learned by sharp students to be wielded against whomever they wish to knock down a peg. It can also be wielded against any argument or evidence one doesn't like. It functions as a kind of inoculation against the self-critical capacity of reason. One of the things that makes me crazy is talk about critical reasoning as the main skill that college is supposed to teach. But the main thing is that it's supposed to be self-critical reasoning. And critical reasoning is actually really cheap and easy to teach. Another tool is a derivative of a deracinated Marxism, especially as reflected in identity politics and decolonial theory, and blended with pious impulses. This tool has been developed interdisciplinarily between the humanities and the social sciences. It prepackages for students a structure for narratives in which demographic groups seek recognition as peoples who have been oppressed and who should unite for their liberation against the occupiers, while other demographic groups are cast as oppressors. This narrative can be adopted by all groups, some more convincingly than others. These two tools are often used in tandem explicitly against the Enlightenment. Certain claims to objective truth or reason are selectively attacked as oppressive and authoritarian, and trauma is then deployed to grant an exalted social status, a sacred status to some political positions, and a forbidden status to other political positions. The sacred status of some claims and some traumas, again, act as a kind of inoculation. It is blasphemous to present counter-evidence. There are enough people on most campuses, not only faculty, but also students, administrators, and staff, trained in this praxis, this blend of theory and revolutionary action to provide institutional support for censorship and other illiberal campus policies. And by trained, I mean explicitly, in classes sometimes, but also in workshops and seminars and mandatory HR certifications, places we might find the privilege walk or the invisible knapsack or the canonical memo explaining microaggressions. Though anti-enlightenment in profound ways, this phenomenon in the humanities and social sciences fits in with some other aspects of the modern Enlightenment. Namely, the university is used to produce a class of people who think of themselves as the enlightened and who are eager to use reason instrumentally to remake the world. Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of the Oppressed has a remarkable line that blends the oppression narrative with the Baconian Enlightenment ideal. In Genuine Dialogue, he says, between the oppressed and their pedagogues, that is the revolutionary leaders, because you don't have genuine dialogue with the oppressors. So in genuine dialogue between the oppressed and their leaders, neither party dominates. Rather, he says, together they dominate nature to produce liberation. As an aside, let me add that a great deal of traditional intellectual work continues to happen in the humanities that isn't described here. The large majority of people who go into the humanities join up because they like reading and thinking and are dedicated to the traditional standards of their disciplines. They mostly just want to spend their career engaging in the life of the mind and sharing it with young people. The upshot is that in selling tools to students to transform the world, many universities express a mishmash of Enlightenment and anti-Enlightenment assumptions. Thus, universities with research and development budgets buttressed by government grants and capitalist philanthropists, universities most of whose students are young bourgeois buying job credentials. These universities train activists in grandiose condemnations of the historical accomplishments and political and economic systems underwriting them. These universities often make official statements condemning the whisper of contrary opinions and promising counseling to those who have suffered trauma by hearing about such contrary opinions. The theory defending this praxis comes out of the humanities and is codified by some social sciences. The other power centers in the university, the hard sciences and the pre-professional disciplines, the people running the customer service and business sides of the institutions, they don't have the intellectual or spiritual resources to resist these anti-Enlightenment impulses within the university itself. These forces within the academy also have influence outside the academy, and it's become pretty mainstream. Predictably, obeying Newton's third law, there have been reactionary polarized mirror image responses. Equally and oppositely dangerous, I would say, responses outside and against the academy. Unfortunately, until the Enlightenment comes for your own research or the books on your side of the library, for most academics, you don't care. My simple point is just that many universities are an incoherent mishmash of pro and anti-Enlightenment impulses. People are so concerned with their parts of the university, their own fields and offices, that no one prioritizes the coherence of the whole or the academic and philosophical values that are supposed to undergird the whole and keep it all together. This is partly because the research university and the disciplines that make it up are not reflective about what education is. This is why when universities speak of education in their advertising, the pathetic best they can do is promise to give their customer students tools to transform the world. The Enlightenment is not something that can be maintained unless it is extended. One of the charges to the panel was to talk about how to maintain and extend the Enlightenment in the academy. And I want to say it cannot be maintained without being extended. First, note that the modern Enlightenment is itself not monolithic. In addition to that, there are many periods, even within Western intellectual history, worthy of being called Enlightenments, the 13th century, for example, though I had personally emphasized the Greek Enlightenment, and more specifically, the Socratic Enlightenment. The core Enlightenment value is, I think, the commitment to reason. The problem with speaking of the Enlightenment, in the singular, is that it implicitly exalts that one age's understanding of reason as paradigm. And despite the variety within the modern Enlightenment itself, it turns out that what we have inherited as the Enlightenment's view of reason is too narrow and too static. Empirico-mathematical reasoning primarily aimed instrumentally towards remaking the world. And this understanding is not enough. Namely, it cannot defend itself because its defense requires a use of reason that isn't merely empirico-mathematical or instrumental. Empirico-mathematical reasoning sometimes thinks it just is reason, the whole of how reason operates, and on its own, it simply cannot address the critiques of reason from the anti-Enlightenment wing of the humanities. People dedicated in the university to empirico-mathematical and instrumental reasoning often don't even see the tensions and contradictions. They are trained to use reason in their fields, but not to think about reason in general. They tend to respect, in an apathetic way, these anti-Enlightenment impulses from their colleagues, seeing them as merely different humanistic forms of enlightened expertise. They don't even see what's happening as an attack on what they believe in as reason. An extended Enlightenment with a broadened sense of reason could more effectively renew liberal education. Now, there are worse things in the world, of course, than advertising to train students to transform the world. But I'd like to point out the distance between this and the idea of liberal education. This is my key point. A liberal education has the guts to tell students that they need to be transformed.
Excellent.
It doesn't flatter them that they are fully developed and need only to be empowered so that they can change everything but themselves. Rather, in liberal education, it is the person that is transformed, and it is reason operating in an intersubjective communal mode that transforms the person. That reason is, in part, the empirico-mathematical and instrumental reasoning, now seen as characteristic of the modern Enlightenment. But more than this, the reason that transforms the person in liberal education is also the same reason that the Socratic Enlightenment emphasized. More precisely, liberal education draws out and habituates the person's capacity for self-critique so that the person transforms him or herself. In fact, and this is a crucial point I want to underline, the human person in genuine liberal education takes on a commitment to reason that transforms the person and even transforms the person's understanding of reason. For the concept of reason does not remain static as the person and the person's understanding of the world change. Instead, one looks back after years in education and sees that the concept of reason to which one first dedicated oneself is now wholly inadequate, superficial. Liberal education is a development of human potential, a development of personhood itself, including how the person reasons and what the person recognizes as reasonable. It is not merely an empowering of a person who is already fully developed. It is not merely data plus calculation utilized to remake the world. It involves the development of judgment, of the capacity to weigh different modes of evidence, to consider serious human concerns, to search for the genuinely true and good in admission that none of us already possess the true and good adequately. It involves the ability to listen to other people's ideas and their reasons and evidence about the just and unjust, good and bad, noble and base. Those are habits that the humanities are best suited to develop and that are needed to complement the progress that the STEM fields continue to make. For new technology and new information are no use to us without people able to understand, to question, to deploy, and to use them well. But the humanities, demoralized, no longer sees this. Education of the person as their primary job. Instead, they mimic the research focus of the sciences and the training for action focus of the professions. One of the problems with any enlightenment is the enlightened. Those people with a rather narrow view of reason and the idea that they and not their opponents possess the whole of reason. But reason is a dynamic capacity, and no person and no age can both commit itself to that capacity and contain it. Those defending the values of the Enlightenment must not presume to be enlightened, but must face reason as an ideal that continues to require them to critique and renew themselves. What education trains us to change, and change again and again as we get older, is us. The panel was also asked to make some kind of proactive, very action item-y suggestions. So what steps should universities today take to maintain and extend the Enlightenment? I would say 4 things. First, defenders of the modern Enlightenment need to renew their connection to the Socratic Enlightenment. 2, universities should specifically aim to convince students to commit themselves to reason as the alternative to ideological and identitarian allegiances, while at the same time challenging the assumption that empirico-mathematical reason is the paradigmatic case of it. Rather, we need to showcase the reason that exercises good judgment and can discern what is best in bad circumstances, and the reason that can turn inward and wonder what it's missing that others might see. 3, we need to remoralize the humanities by affirming that their central job is liberal education, not their majors, not research, and not training for either graduate school or revolutionary action.
What's the difference?
And finally, universities should not be in the business of flattering students that we will empower them to change the world. Genuine reason is a capacity of self-transformation. Have the guts to tell students that before they can improve the world, they must first improve themselves.